There's this, it's an art and music. People have the idea you get discovered. I don't think for drawing and painting, people get discovered. I think you have to just constantly put your work out there and just be kind of relentless about it. I started drawing in December of 2005, and it was a very specific moment in particular. I had a friend in one of my classes who drew anime, and they were probably the best out of our little clique. And the way they did it, they just took a picture I'd printed off the internet, and in 15 minutes they drew it, and it was like, there's that character in the page, like in the paper. And I was like, how do you do that? And I was just like, I want to be able to figure out how to do that. I just started doing it. And when I started, I was really bad. And then I kept practicing and I got better at it. Art, when I first started, it was an identity thing to me. It was because when you're a teenager, you do certain things to feel significant or to feel like you belong. And for me, that was art, because if that's what my friends did, I wanted them to accept me. And it looked really cool. And that was like a genuine part of it too. But I think in the beginning, it was almost more about like a sense of identity. I think it's still very much a sense of identity for me, but it's not like I feel the need to be accepted by my friends so much or whoever. It's more like I'm going to do what I think looks cool, and there'll be people who like it and there'll be people who don't. But yeah, I'm just going with it. I have dyslexia, and it's a learning disability. And in school, most things require reading to do. And so I definitely felt insecure because of that. As a younger child, I was a little bit more on the overweight side. And so just a lot of insecurity, and I just kind of snapped, not outwardly, but I just kind of snapped inside. And I was just like, I felt determined for the very first time, because I was like a really lazy kid. And I felt determined for the first time. And it felt like, even though it was like taking on a little bit of a challenge at the time, it felt fulfilling. And I hadn't felt fulfillment in my life, like ever. And so I just got like addicted to that experience. And, and after that, I felt like there was a time where I kind of climbed that mountain, and I was like, okay, what's the next mountain? And yeah, just finding things in art that are challenging and trying to take my colored pencils and climb that mountain. My last year of high school, there's this art competition in the state of Texas. Everybody enters it. And the top winning pieces are always these photorealistic colored pencil pieces. And so I saw what people were doing. And these weren't even professionals. These were students, but very, very talented students who spent months on their work. And I was like, I want to be able to do that. Like, that's my next mountain I want to climb, is how do I take something and make it look like a photo, do it all with colored pencil, because it's so precise that it can really do whatever you want it to do, and you have an extreme level of control with it. That precision, that's the strength of colored pencil. It's always colored pencil in particular. It's kind of this medium that a lot of people underestimate, and they don't really think it's capable of photorealism. They think of it as a child's toy kind of thing. And I identify with it so much because I used to underestimate myself, and I think people used to underestimate me. And people underestimate colored pencil, but yet it's kind of proving itself in the hands of certain artists. And so I really like that. And so I feel kind of this symbolic relationship with it, actually. I started a picture. I didn't show it to anybody but my wife as I was working on it. And it was a portrait of my wife with water flowing down her face. And I'd seen pictures of people with water flowing down their face, but for some reason I just had this like idea that I wouldn't be able to pull it off for whatever reason. And I'd never drawn something so close up before in colored pencil. I'd always drawn the full figure inside of the artworks. and it was, I think, my biggest piece I'd done to that point. And I just, over the process of maybe 2 or 3 months there, I was working on it. And one night my wife comes up to me, and this was in Florida when I was going broke. She said, "I think you could become known for this. You could become Jesse Lane, the guy who does water portraits." And I fantasized about that for a second, and I was like, that would be so cool. But like, of course, that's not going to happen, because all I'd ever known was I do drawings and I'll show them to like maybe the 6 closest people to me, and they'll be like, "Yeah, that's really good. That's really good." And that was about all my art was for being known about. And lo and behold, I'm Jesse Lane, the guy who does water portraits. When I started my career professionally, it began with a series of headshots with water flowing down them. It was called Anatomy of Light. The hands would be in a lot of them to help compose the images, and the hands and the face are the two most, they tell emotion more than any other part of the body. And so that's what I would use, and they'd be, very realistic, capturing all the wrinkles and the pores and hairs and people. Conceptually, it was about finding your identity, me, and the story that I went through, finding my identity, the struggles. There was a lot of, really rough moments, and I think I was definitely an outcast when I was younger. And it was reflecting back on a lot of my past. It was starting to feel maybe a little bit repetitive, and I wanted to branch out of that and really more vividly tell stories. I think I was telling stories before with my work, but it left more to the viewer to try to figure out, okay, where is this person? Why is there water in these pieces? What else could be going on around them? And I was letting the viewer try to figure all that out. And now I'm putting people underwater or crashing into water. And it's kind of painting a little bit more of the picture of what could be going on without giving them the full story. And there's a whimsical quality to it. There's a romantic quality to it. And they're more lighthearted as well as being serious. I think the underwater pieces I've done have been, in a way, my most serious, darkest pieces, but at the same time, they're also the most whimsical and fun, and they feel like a fairy tale at the same time. And I love that, because for me, there's got to be an emotional substance to the work. And I think I've hit that in my portraits without being underwater, but it was always dark a lot of the time. And I like that, but I also don't want to feel overly negative or like I'm dwelling, but I don't want to give up the substance either. And so by going underwater, I can be both whimsical and serious at the same time. And I have 2 different types of substance that balance the piece out. And that's what's exciting to me right now. So when I launched my career professionally, one of the things that I think kept me from doing that sooner, and that I was very hesitant with in the beginning, is marketing. And I would want to spend all my time drawing, because that's what personally matters to me, and just how good can I become. And marketing is kind of a separate thing from that. And I think a lot of artists fail because they, not because they're not good enough, it's because they fail to market, they fail to do the research or to put their art in the right place that's good for them, or they fail to schedule both time for making their artwork as well as marketing. And it's really 2 jobs at once, and they're kind of opposite in a way. One is kind of more for introverts in a way, and one is even more extroverted to some extent. I think a lot of artists struggle with confidence. Like I said, a lot of us are introverts, and it's easy to think, oh, well, I'm an artist, and that's not a very good paying profession, and it can kind of run down your self-confidence a little bit. I'm still wrestling with, and have wrestled with, some of the earliest lessons I've learned. I've had to unlearn them, if that makes sense. So, for example, I was told by a drawing teacher I very much respect in high school, people don't buy portraits of other people to hang in their home. They want landscapes or they want animals. You know, you can't just draw people if you want to sell your work. And this is an art teacher who I respect so much. And I've had to kind of prove to myself otherwise a little bit. And I think people struggle with their identity. And, you know, I'm a colored pencil artist. And so it's sometimes discriminated compared to oil paint, where people, you know, they say, well, oil paint is better and drawing is for, you know, more amateur artists. I don't hear it as much as I used to now that my work is kind of more technically realistic. But, you know, I've wrestled with struggling with my own identity to think, no, whatever a painter can do, you know, I can at least put that to paper with my pencils and make something that looks like that, because, you know, it's about putting pigment on the paper and making an image. And what does that look like? And so you just, yeah, you have to look out to make sure you're not having limiting beliefs on what your artwork can do and can't do. And sometimes you have to just put yourself out there and try, and, you know, and not expect to have anything great come of it. And a lot of times it won't, but then sometimes it does, and it exceeds your expectations. And it's like, wow, I wouldn't have seen that happening, but that's what happened. I think by the time my artwork started to get attention, I was so hungry for it because, you know, I think at most of high school, my work was like, yeah, he's kind of getting good. And then I had a great year in high school, and then I went off to college, and everyone was animating and I was drawing. And so it wasn't the coolest thing to do. And at times it was going against the grain. And so when I got out of there to have my artwork embraced, it was just like this big sigh of relief that I had. Planning a picture is the most challenging part of it for me. It always has been, and I think it might always be, but it's also by far the most exciting, rewarding part of the process once you get something you feel is really good. And then it's like, how do I share this vision with the world? You know, it's just, I can't wait to put in the hours to make that happen. And so I'll try to think of something, and composition goes into a lot of it, and lighting, because that's a huge part of what makes a great image. And for me, it's about taking an obvious concept, but adding some subtlety to it, or something that goes against the obviousness of it. But I'll make a little sketch just to get my ideas down, and I'll pick a model. And, you know, I've been working with professional models lately, and that's opened up a lot of doors for like just possibilities. Whatever look I want to get, I can now go find somebody who has that look. And so that's really exciting for me. I find models out of Houston. You know, Houston's a big city, so we have a lot of people here, and a lot of them model. And so, yeah, I just approach somebody, and I'll take detail shots of their hands and their nose and their eyes and everything. So I have those details to work from later. I'll piece it all together in Photoshop. It looks very rough at first, but I can see with that where I'm going. So it's a little bit of a map kind of where I'm hoping to go with my drawing. And then I spend the majority of my time just drawing that with colored pencil. With lighting, I try to emphasize the areas that I think are most important. So it's almost always around the eyes. And then, you know, I'll tone down areas, make them darker that are less important or that go against like the compositional flow. But lighting is important because you can't cheat form, which is how the light hits the subject. So you can cheat lighting somewhat, but you can't cheat it a lot. I've developed a technique with colored pencil that's very photorealistic, and the skin tones in it, they're not just a layer of peach or tan or brown. They've got all these colors within color. They've got pink, purple, green, yellow, and that's something that not a whole lot of colored pencil artists have really caught on to yet, is capturing that level of richness and complexity to skin tones. And I think that's one of the ways to make a skin tone look photorealistic. So I've been traveling the country teaching workshops to different art groups where people sign up and they come learn from me for a couple days, and I'll teach them and show them how to do it. And it's been really cool for me because I've met other really talented artists doing that. And it's also just great to get out of my studio and see the country. And I get ideas for pieces when I kind of break out of my ordinary life. And it's been really incredible to see the country and meet other people and share what I know. And the students are always so welcoming and nice that it's great to be around people who are excited to see it. Something I'm kind of glad that I didn't do was try to market my artwork too soon. I think the fact that I did wait until I was maybe more developed with my artistic voice and my technique, I think that gave me more momentum once I did step out there. It's like more like, whoa, who is this at this level, rather than here's this kid, on his up and coming. And I'm still an up and coming kid in the bigger art world, but in the colored pencil world, I think it helped me to step out into that stronger when I did. Eventually, I approached RJD Gallery in New York and asked them if they'd be interested in showing my work. And one of the things they look for, I think that a lot of galleries look for, is they want it to look unique enough to where the artist made it without having to see the signature, because it has certain identifiable qualities to it. It's unique, and because collectors, they want to feel like they own a piece by the certain artist, and they want that personal identity to the work. They specialize in imaginative realism. And so after I joined with them, I looked around the gallery and I saw what other people were doing. And it was really exciting. And I was like, what if I were to not try to copy that, but do something that was a little bit more imaginative realism, but still very much a Jesse Lane and everything my work stands for and means to me? How do I bring that into imaginative realism? That could be cool. And so I kind of started to experiment with different ways of doing that. And I think where that's led me is I've made one that's underwater. I'm working on a second that's underwater. And I'm thinking I want to keep doing that because it is, being underwater, it's a very isolated experience. You're in your head a lot. It can be dangerous, but it's also very often romantic and very often beautiful and unusual and unique. And I just think there's so much going on underwater that not very many artists really are exploring. And I think I can do it. And so I'm really excited about where that's taking me. RJD Gallery is the only place that people can buy my work. I do occasionally show it elsewhere. There's an international show by the Colored Pencil Society of America. They have a show every year. It's in a different state. And I enter that every summer because the colored pencil community is very important to me and I'm very personally invested in it. But that's kind of the only show that I regularly enter outside of RJD. Right now, I'm kind of all chips in on RJD Gallery because, I want to progress my career as a professional artist as much as possible. And, I'm lucky to be with them. And so, not many colored pencil artists get to be in a gallery. And so it's great that I'm with them. It's exciting when your work, not only are you going to make it, but it's like you've got a place to show it. And, it's got a little home there for a while that really welcomes it in. And that's a great feeling that, where your artwork is going, because I do kind of miss the pieces after I box them up and ship them off. But so the next best thing is to know that they're in a place where they're being cherished and appreciated. The advice I would give to an artist is embrace what makes you unique. I do colored pencil. It would be so much more mainstream to take my photorealism and try to do it in oil paint and try to fit right in doing portraits of people. But I'm sticking with colored pencil, and that's what's unique to me. That's what I know. That's my background. That's what I started with 14 years ago. And when people say, well, why don't you paint? It's like, to me, the answer, I may not always say it, but it's like, that's not what I do. I do colored pencil. A future strength can definitely start out as a weakness, if that makes sense. But you hone your weakness, you own your weakness, and then it's your unique strength. Most people have some level of insecurity, And I think you have to be careful not to let that just take the steering wheel. And once you realize that, you can like really take advantage of your art career. So I found out recently I'm entering contests not because I feel like I need to enter contests from a marketing standpoint. I'm entering contests because if I win, if I get into the show, it makes me feel good about my work. But that's maybe not like what makes sense to do. It might make more sense to send my work to the gallery and try to sell it there if, since I want to be a professional artist. You have to realize like you are human as an artist, and as artists we get very, very emotional, and your emotions are your strength and you do want to use them, but you don't want to let your emotions use you. The next piece of advice I would give is to have a balance between what is it? Self-belief and self-doubt. And you have to manage, I think every successful artist has a healthy amount of both of those, because if you doubt yourself so much, you're just never going to try anything. You're not going to reach for the big visions. You're not going to like say, let me see what I can do. But if you think you're just so good already, then you kind of fall into a rut and you don't challenge yourself either. So if you have all of one, you wind up not challenging yourself. And I think what I believe is I'm always trying to put myself in the position of, I don't know how to draw everything in my drawing when I go into it, but I have enough like faith in myself based on my past experiences to know I'll do whatever it takes to figure it out. If it takes over 1,000 hours, I will spend 1,000 hours on it. If it takes several hundred, I'll do that. And you just keep believing in yourself to figure out what you don't know how to do. To me, that's everything. And I can see it in people. I see it when I meet certain artists. They say, oh, I don't want to do that because that's too hard, or that would take how many hours? And they bring their emotions into it in a way that kind of limits them. And I think, if you want to dream big, but then like be willing to do what it takes, which comes back to working hard. But I think there's a lot of self-belief that goes into art. There was a piece I did a few years ago of this big wave of water crashing into a figure. And at the time going into it, I didn't know how to do it, but I had the faith in myself to figure it out. And there would be weeks where it's just every single day, all day long, I would draw one water drop and then draw the next water drop and the next one. And eventually I drew like over 4,000 water drops. And eventually it looked like it was all crashing into this figure and shattering. I didn't know how to do it going in, but I figured it out. And now I feel really good about it. And I don't know that I feel off the top of my head how to do it again, but it's like, I can figure it out. It's just, I try to simplify my life to only figuring out how to draw whatever it is I'm drawing, and be patient with it and trial and error. And you figure it out, and you take a first run at it, and then you regroup and look, how do I draw it a little bit better? And you tweak it, and then you maybe show it to some people and get their opinion, and eventually you get there. As far as achieving realism, hyperrealism, it's definitely a goal I've had. I've been doing this for 14 years now. It's been a major goal of mine for maybe 11, 12 of those years to achieve like photorealism. But now that I've hit that point, there's a little bit of a finish line with it. You can't be any more real than real. And so now I'm getting to the point where I want to take that photorealistic technique and I want to use it as a tool to tell stories. I think photorealism is a hook, and it makes people stop and go, wow, how did they make something like photorealistic with pencil? And so it gets them intrigued at first. That's what most people, it really hooks them. But then I want to, once I have their attention, I want to tell a story. And so my work is becoming more imaginative, more vivid stories, more whimsical, but also serious at the same time, and having a dichotomy of those two emotions. And for me, it's just like, okay, what stories can I tell now that I know the language?